Hello, everyone, and welcome to another CTC webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, Technical Evangelist here at CTC, and today we're going to talk about HIVE, specifically focusing on the Complete Administrator's Guide. The goal today is to really help make sure that you, as an administrator of HIVE, can really be a quality admin. You know exactly what the settings are, what they mean, and how to set it up for your company. We're going to define all the steps that are required for proper user creation, library definition, tag organization, all this stuff, content management, everything. Now, this is not a small set of tasks. We're going to kind of try to cover each one in depth so you can actually ensure that you can manage HIVE appropriately for yourselves. Do feel free to ask questions while we're going through this. One request, though, try not to make it paragraphs of a question. I try to read them in line while I'm talking. And it makes it a little tricky if it's 3 paragraphs long to get to the question. So try to keep it short if you would. That'd be appreciated. Also, if you're watching this as a recording later on, not as the live presentation, feel free to leave us questions in our YouTube channel as well. We try to pay attention to those and answer those questions when relevant. All right, let's go through the actual steps here that we're going to be covering. We're going to go through, in order, company settings, creating libraries, adding and updating content, adding users and user groups in a couple of different ways. We're going to talk about tag administration, look at managing requests, and also how to manage content when you want to get rid of it out of HIVE, how to actually delete content that you no longer want or need. So with that, let's jump directly into HIVE. All right, let's get out here on my desktop. Now, HIVE is a Windows program. Not everybody uses HIVE directly from a design application like Revit. And so you can certainly fire up HIVE here directly from the desktop. Just double click right on HIVE. It'll open up. It'll log you in as whatever user you were last logged in as. In my case, it's a basic end user. I'm going to log out of that user. We're going to log in as myself. So I got to spell my name right, though. That works better. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here. You can see I've got a bunch of controls over here on the left-hand side. And in my case, I have the actual control panel or the toolbar open. You can collapse it if you want just the icons for a little bit more space, or you can open it back up again. I've also got filters set over here to the right, and I like leaving filters open all the time, though if you wanted to, you could collapse it and then reopen it again from the Show Filters button here at the top. That's all up to you, how you want to organize your interface. As an admin, this is typically what I see. This is typically what I use. There's a couple of other windows we'll look at here in a moment. But first off, let's go take a look at the company settings. It's important to have these settings pretty well defined and have an idea of how you want to use HIVE before you start adding content. And the main reason why, there's a main option right here in the middle that says Enable Content Upload. And by default, that's turned on. Now, if you do not want content to be uploaded, I understand that. That's fine. You can simply uncheck this box. But if you do want content uploaded and you want it to be cloud hosted, which does make a lot of the Revit specific workflows very efficient, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but I would recommend having this checked. Also, just below that, there's the ability to check this option that says always download content from the cloud. Now, if you do this, you want to make sure all of your libraries are cloud hosted. There are times when you may not want to have cloud-hosted libraries. That's fine. If you don't, that's okay, but you need to make sure you uncheck this box if some of your content is not actually in the cloud. Also inside of here, you can change how users can interact with HIVE itself. So first of all, up here, deleting log files and deleting cached content. You can have this automatically delete after X number of days. You can also control the directories in which this information is stored. So this cached content and log files are most important when a person is actually pulling content from the cloud. If for some reason something crazy happened and you're like, oh, how come this person's not getting the latest bit of information? Well, it'll be important to look at their log file. Or if you have uploaded new information, they had an older version, you might want it to automatically cache and again know where that is. So you have some control over this, and when you make these changes here, these automatically apply to everybody across the company. So when I click Save Settings, next time people log in, they immediately get these settings just automatically pushed. And you're the only one as a company admin who can see these. There's actually two roles we'll be talking about today. One is company admin and one is a library admin. Right now we're talking about roles that relate to company admins. In fact, company, tags, users, and user groups, these four buttons here are exclusive to company admins. So that's why I like getting this part right here, the company portion at least set up ahead of time. You can also decide whether or not users can install updates. So Hive by default, when it opens up, will notify users of updates and let them actually install the update. Now, if you work in a company where installing stuff on a client's computer is prohibited by them, only admins can do that, you might want to uncheck this option so that users, they won't be prompted to actually try to install the update. If you are a smaller or mid-sized company and you do allow your users to install updates, Hive will try to automatically prompt them to install. And this is a great way of getting everybody up to date because Hive will push them to actually update. There's also some other options down here about how users can interact with your content. We'll take a look at where some of these are being used later, but you can change whether or not users can comment, rate, tag, and use the request feature. Requests are actually sitting over here, and we'll take a look at the request portion a little later on. But if you decide you don't want that, you can actually uncheck this users can submit requests, and that'll actually disable this button across the board. There's also the ability for users to manually clear out their local cache, which is this cached content portion up here. From the user page, they actually have that feature where they can clear it out completely if they want to. That's up to you if you want to allow for that. Also, can they send us here at CTC bug reports and feature requests? That's something that they can get to from the About page. And if they were over there, then they could say, oh, hey, there's this great idea that I have. Let's send it off to CTC. Or, hey, I'm crashing frequently for whatever reason. Send us a bug. And if they think it's related to Hive. So we appreciate if you let this stay on, but some of you may want to gatekeep that a bit. So you could certainly turn these off if you really wanted to. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save these settings. I didn't actually make any changes, but it's just a habit of mine. If I'm in this window and I click or unclick anything, I generally will click Save Settings just by habit. All right, so that's talking about the company settings. This is generally, again, as a company admin, the first place that I recommend that you go visit. And once you're done here, it's time to start building up some libraries. I'm going to give you some suggestions today for those of you who have Revit and sort of a BIM workflow in your company. In the libraries portion over here, I recommend having these 6 libraries as a decent starting point. Well, I should say 5 libraries. You can exclude the Revit MEP Productivity Pack portion. That's kind of a subset of my corporate content here. But if you're using AutoCAD, for example, you can put AutoCAD content into Hive. If you're using Revit, I recommend having a corporate Revit library. If you're allowing people to see the out-of-the-box content, I like to keep that content separate in its own library. You don't have to, but I like to do that because it makes it a little bit easier for people to filter. Personal preference there. Again, the Revit MEP Productivity Pack content here is a corporate specific portion that could be dumped directly into my Revit content library up on top, but I've chosen to separate it for my own purposes. In fact, we'll be using this library later today. I have a standards and procedures library. This is a great place to put all your Revit standards, your BIM workflow standards, all of that. It's a good spot for it right there. And then also I have templates. And you can see over here to the right, I've actually labeled and given myself some descriptions on these libraries. You say, yeah, but Sean, how do I create a library? Well, that's a great question. It's actually pretty easy. On the top up here, there is a new button. When you click new, you can make your own brand new library. In fact, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new library specifically that is going to be called Standards and Procedures 2. And we're going to use this for part of our workflow today. And then I'm going to come back and clean this up later because I need to do this demonstration more than one time, of course. So Standards and Procedures 2. I think I spelled that right. Hopefully I did. We'll find out in a minute here. Of course, you can give yourself a description. So I'm going to call this temporary standards library. I also have the ability to choose whether or not this library is cloud hosted. So I had the choice earlier on the company setting to say whether or not content could be uploaded. Here, I'm saying with my library setting, whether or not it is actually uploaded. So you can control this fairly granularly at the library level. You also have the ability here, if you've already created users and user groups, to add them right now. Now, I'm going to pretend that I haven't created any users or user groups yet. We're going to get to that option in a minute and come back and post-manage this particular library, Standards and Procedures 2 here. So I'm going to create this library. So here's my library sitting out there, ready to go, ready for me to be able to use it and dump information into that library. That's fantastic. So let's talk about actually adding some content. Well, I'm in Windows right now. I'm using the Windows program. In a moment here, we'll go use the Revit add-in portion to add Revit specific content. And that is an important step. You do want to add Revit content from Revit. But here in Hive, what I want to do is add some standards and procedures information. So I'm going to go to add content over here. When you're adding content, you want to choose which library you want that content dumped into. In my case, Standards and Procedures 2. You can also associate a couple of tags to this if you'd like. So if you have a few tags, like in my case, what I'm going to be adding is some documentation relating to shared coordinates. So I could put coordinates in there as one example. I could put maybe shared coordinates as another one in case somebody saw that particular tag. In fact, I should probably clean that up a little bit. That's a little bit redundant in this case. There might be some other things like standards or whatever else. I might check standards, which is kind of silly because it's in the Standards and Procedures folder, but maybe a person's looking specifically for a standard as opposed to a workflow. And I might delineate or differentiate my documents that way. That's up to you. You can also write from here as a company admin, or if you were a library admin, you also have the ability here to create new tags. So you can actually go, well, there's another thing that I want for this, which is terrain or something like that. You can put that in there right now, and that would actually add it as a tag and assign it to the content that I'm about to add. Now, when I'm adding a whole bunch of stuff, folders and folders of content, I typically don't go in there and add a lot of tags, maybe one or two that relate to everything. You can always come back later and modify files further and add additional tags in the future. It's a good idea, though, to kind of start with some basic tagging, and you'll see me to do that in the future as well. So here I'm going to go and grab files. You can grab files individually. You can grab a folder, a whole entire folder of content, and I'll do that later on in Revit, and I'll filter some of that stuff out. You can also remove certain things that maybe you had selected that you maybe didn't want. You also have the option, notice this, of dragging and dropping files from Windows right here in this folder, or right here in this bucket. So you can just drop them directly into Hive. Well, in this case, I'm going to go manually add some files. I'm going to browse out to where I've got some of this. I've stored this on my desktop, which, by the way, is a horrible place to actually put standards documentation. This should be on the network. But for our example today, this just makes my life a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and use this. Now, I've got BIM manual as one of my folders here. And if I scroll down a little ways, I've got 4 documents, or rather 4 PDFs specifically. It's usually better to put standards documentation in as a PDF and not as a document file. So when somebody opens it up, they can't edit it, they can just read it. That's, of course, your choice how you want to handle that. But I'm going to go ahead and add these 4 PDFs. All 4 of these relate to terrain modeling and shared coordinates in my Revit model workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. It's actually Revit and Civil 3D workflow specifically. Those 4 files will all 4 be added to my Standards and Procedures 2 folder, library rather, and they will all have those 3 tags associated to them. So I'm going to click Process and let this thing think about it for a second. So what Hive is doing right now is it's looking at the file properties and storing them. It's associating the tags and putting them into that library. It only takes a few seconds. They're already added. So now if a user wanted to search, or if I, as a company admin or a library admin, wanted to test the searching, I could go over here to my libraries, grab Standards and Procedures 2 as a filter, and I'm just going to search for everything. Just hit Enter up here. And what I should find are the 4 files. In my case right now, I have this set up to show me a list view. I like using this as a company admin because now I can take a look at the tags that are associated right away and see exactly which library it's in, which of course should be Standards and Procedures 2, since that's what I filtered out. I can see the original path. I can see when it was added, by whom, and if it was updated recently, and again, by whom. So if I double click on one of these files, like establishing shared coordinates over here, when I double click on this, I now have the ability to read this document in whatever that native reader happens to be on my computer. And an end user would have the exact same experience. I like to test some of the content after I've added. I feel like it makes a good way of kind of modifying, what's going on. Now you can, by the way, also update content right from this search. You can do content management either from the content portion here. I tend not to use that personally. I usually do general searches up here and filtering of my stuff from this main window from where the users see it. And if you're a library admin or a company admin, when you right-click on content, you'll get special controls like deleting something from the library. That's kind of pre-talking about deleting. We'll come back to that. You can also edit the thing that's been added. So I can come back and edit anything. Now this edit right here actually edits the metadata inside of HIVE. So here I'm seeing the original upload. I'm seeing all of the tags and I can administer those. I can see any attachments that might be associated with this file, and I can add some attachments if I want to. An attachment is like, I'll give an example. It's like a PDF, or rather an Excel document that a user is supposed to fill out that maybe accompanies an instructional PDF. I'll give an example of that with the LOD in a moment here. You can also associate links to this. Sometimes when you add standards documentation, you may very well have a training video or a YouTube video that you want to reference along with that document. Maybe you wanted to use some of CTC's mini training pages to actually help support some of the standards documentation that you've written. Fantastic. You can add links to those sites and those specific videos directly here in the content. So when a user is looking at this, if they're looking at the details as well, they can see attachments and links. You can also see library associations and add additional associations. So if you wanted a certain piece of content to associate to more than one library, you can modify that. You can see the comments that have been left by users, and you can see the ratings that have been left by users. And we'll take a look at this again more in a little while here when we look at some Revit-specific content. Now again, so far, all of this that we've done has been done from Windows and from the Windows program. And you can use that Windows program just fine. But here's the trick. A lot of the time, many of you are using Revit and you wanted to use HIVE specifically with Revit. Well, that's fantastic. Let's close out of HIVE right now for Windows and let's open up Revit specifically. I'm going to open up Revit 2018 over here. I've got a file that I was drawing a little bit in earlier today. No big deal. But my goal here is to actually open up HIVE and take a look at what I can do inside there right now. Now, the Revit add-in, because I was already logged into it a little while ago, remembered that I was logged in as Joe Demo. I'm going to log in as myself. Notice when I log out, it automatically populates my username because it went, oh yeah, that's what you were last logged in as or should have been. So it'll open up as me right now. Okay, now that I'm in Revit specifically, I want to point some things out. There's a little bit of a difference between the HIVE Revit add-in versus the Windows program. In Revit, when a person is filtering, they have only Revit content as a filter. This is an application-specific filter. It wouldn't make sense to see this in Windows because I'm not in Revit. It's not relevant. I also have Revit categories and Revit version as filters as well. These three filters exist within Revit HIVE add-in specifically. Also, you have the ability to navigate and add content from your active project. This is more relevant for end users, but I want you to be aware there's an extra icon that shows up inside of HIVE when you're in Revit. Also, when you're over here on the Add Content tab, it's not just files anymore. In the Windows program, it was just files. There was no actual options up in the top. You could choose your library, tags, add some files, and go. In Revit, you have files, and it's kind of tailored to actually be able to accept Revit families and Revit projects if you wanted a Revit project added as, say, a template model. It's a great way of actually having people kick off templates. If you haven't seen that, I'll actually show that a little bit later on as we kick off a new file similar to this one in the background. But you can also add content that exists within a project. So whatever project you have open, that's where HIVE will be adding the content from, is that background project. In my case, this is an unsaved project. It's actually been opened up, detached, you can see up here. And so if I add content from here, HIVE won't know what its original source is, and it'll be difficult for me to keep it updated in the future. So ideally, you'd have an actual warehouse file that you're using. And we'll use a warehouse file in just a moment here. We have two different ones, and we'll be adding a little bit of electrical content into HIVE, into my MEP library in just a moment here. First though, let's add some regular Revit families into HIVE. I was mentioning when you're adding content that you might want to filter some of this stuff. And let's take a look at how that can happen. I'm going to take an entire folder worth of content and add all of it. Well, not all of it. I'm going to filter a lot of that stuff out and show you what happens when you use the folder option, especially when you're dealing with Revit content. So first off, I'm going to tell it that I want to dump some new content into the MEP library. I know there's some new stuff there, and I want to be able to see what it is. So Revit MEP is a library I'm going to dump into. I'm not quite sure yet exactly what I want to tag it as, other than perhaps this is all Imperial content. And so I may want to actually tag most of what I'm going to be adding right now as Imperial, as opposed to metric, for example. So I'm going to check Imperial. I may come back and add additional stuff in a moment here, but let's go grab a bunch of content. So I'm going to browse out to a folder. On my computer here, I've got a bunch of content saved in a subfolder, or I should say on my network maybe. Well, in my case, let's be honest, it's my computer. I'm going to go here to my content packs, MEP productivity pack. We're going to go grab MEP content, and there's a bunch of stuff here. Annotation components, model objects, and a set of project models that are actually warehouse files. When I click OK here, HIVE is going to read all of the files and give them to me nearly instantaneously. It's almost right away. It's a couple hundred or so, maybe a couple thousand files in this mix. Yeah, it's about 700 files. All right. A lot of these I don't need. Notice how I've got RWS files here. These are some backup files from a central model. I don't want those. And so what I like to do is instantly go here to my file type, and I'm going to filter this out and get rid of, out of this list right now, RFAs. I'm not going to show them right now. They're going to be in the list, but I'm just not going to show them. There's a bunch of other stuff like BAT files, data files, Revit models that I don't want right now, RWS, logs, text files, all kinds of stuff, and I don't want any of those to be added. So what I'm going to do is basically remove all that I've got here. In fact, what I'm going to do is grab all of this entire list. I'm going to specifically select it so I don't remove everything, and remove the selected items. All those file types that are not really relevant for my Revit content. Now I'm going to come back and turn back on RFAs. So I see a whole bunch of stuff. And you see this little icon right here, this update option? This is because all of this content is already inside HIVE. And if I process right now, all of it gets processed, reprocessed, and re-updated into HIVE, which is fantastic. I mean, that's a great way to update a bunch of stuff real quick if you felt there was a bunch of updates to your library. I like it. But here's the deal. I don't want to sit here and wait for, I don't know, how many families right now? 600 plus families to actually reprocess and update. That's not what I want. There's a few down here that are newish, and I may want to add those. And so what I'm going to do is remove anything that has update flagged for it. Remove all the update content. And that'll leave me some very specific things. Now, this is designed to be MEP content. I happen to have some extra content out here that's structural based. I didn't realize I had this, but I don't want it. Oh, these are electrical content. Let's keep these guys. All the rest of the stuff is structural. I'm going to remove again the selected elements and just keep these 6 right here. In fact, I'm going to get rid of this motor example as well. I want to keep motor generic, domestic water heater, which is actually a plumbing component. Looks like it might be deprecated, but that's okay. A couple of junction boxes, and I'm going to go ahead and add all 5 of these in. Now, I don't know if this tells me this right now. It does not. I can tell you just from experience, all of these files are in Revit 2016. The version of Revit that I'm in right now is Revit 2018.2. Now, I don't really want these files upgraded. I want them staying in 2016, and that's okay, because when I'm adding files specifically with HIVE, HIVE does not do anything to those files. It leaves them as they are. Now, it has to open them to read the information, so it'll do a temporary upgrade, but it doesn't save the file that way. It actually closes it and then uploads the original file. So I'm going to go ahead and click process here and let this thing chunk away. You can see it's going to do some upgrades there. It's going to read the stuff in the background. In this case, the 5 files. And it's going to go pretty quickly. But at the same time, so we're not just sitting here watching this do its thing. Well, it might be done before I'm done talking. We're also going to add some project information. And I know that my project information is also in Revit 2016. Now, when you're adding project hosted data, like details or system families, it's probably going to be a good idea. No, it's definitely a good idea to open up that proper version of Revit. So for me, that's Revit 2016. I'm going to jump over to Revit 2016, and I'm going to open up my electrical details file here, right off my shortcut. I'm going to be following very bad workflows. Those of you that are administrators on the phone or on the line here watching this, you know that that's not what you're supposed to do, but I'm doing it just because it's a standalone file and I think I'll be okay for right now. So in Revit 2016, where'd it go? There it is. How come you disappeared on me? There it is. There's my Revit 2016. All this file has in it is a whole bunch of drafting views. They're all detailed, every one of them. And that's really it. There's no schedules, there's no objects drawn, there's a couple of sheets, but primarily it's all detailed. Now, if I want these sheets and these details to be easily translated from HIVE into a user's project, that's pretty easy. All I have to do is open up HIVE and tell it that I want to bring that content in. So Express Tools, HIVE, let's see what it logs me in as. It might remember that I was in as Joe demo recently. Let's see what it does. Come on, HIVE. There we go. Oh, hey, it's me. Awesome. So I'm logged in as myself. And here I'm going to go back to my add content process. I'm going to go to libraries, Revit MEP. Here again, these are all, I believe, electrical details. Yes, fantastic. So these are all imperial and electrical. Everything that I'm adding right now is going to follow those two major things. Now I could come back and tag them as additional things later on, but for now, electrical and imperial are the two that I care about. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Actually, I'm in the files area. That's wrong. I should be in the project area. My apologies. Over here, Revit MEP, once again, tags. I'm going to do electrical and imperial. There we go. All right. Now all I have to do is go through and check the things that I care about. Now, if I really wanted to check stuff quickly, I could simply filter out from my categories again. At the top of most of these columns is going to be a filter option. And I could say, hey, only give me, drafting views or detail groups. So I got detail groups here in the list. I have views. I have sheets, I think. Yeah, I got sheets right here. So I can get just those things. Notice how a couple of these have already been added into HIVE. That's fantastic. I can use those. Or I can simply check a few things that haven't been updated just yet. So I can grab a couple more things here and I'll add these into HIVE. I'm going to scroll down. I should have, or scroll up maybe. Yeah, here's a couple of sheets that I had in my project. In fact, I can see them right there. I want to add these sheets as well so I can have them added to HIVE directly. There might be some things already placed on those sheets, so I can leverage them. And I can drag and drop those. You can add sheets, drafting views, detail groups, model groups, and any draw-capable system family. So things like walls, ceilings, floors, duct types, pipe types, all that kind of stuff can be added directly into HIVE and dropped into your model, into client user models. So I'm going to go ahead and process this. Again, this file here comes from Revit 2016. I'm processing it in Revit 2016, and that is because of my company setting that tells it that it can upload content and that I always want users to download it. What HIVE will do, I'm going to go ahead and start processing this here. What it will do is actually create me micro files, one file, one Revit project for each one of these entries that I've chosen, and it makes it super small so users can, base and it uploads to the cloud. So when users are dropping content, they're dropping out of these smaller files. So it makes it very, very efficient. While this is processing, I'm going to jump back over to Revit 2018. So we're not just sitting here watching the screen here as that thing processes. I guess it's going to process in the foreground anyway. That's fantastic. Thank you, HIVE. We'll take the, I'll move this off to the other monitor here. We'll put this over here. All right. Back inside of HIVE, let's also take a look at adding users now for a little bit. When you're adding users specifically, you can do an individual user add. So if you wanted to bring in one brand new user and have them help test out part of your libraries, go ahead, new user right here. The most important thing that you have to provide is their email address. So in my case, my email address here for this new user is demo user from Office 3. It's a salesperson from Office 3. They're an enabled user at my company. All right, so I've got this. Oh, I didn't put the dot there. I've got this user. This is just a dummy account that I've got so I can add a user live in front of you. You'll see more of the emails like this here as well. And so this user is going to be, let's see, we'll do Robin Hood. Sure, why not? So we've got, first name, last name, whether or not this person is going to be a part of your company administrator team. And you want to be careful who you give this to, because if you do this, then they have all the same controls you've got. So I'm going to, in this case, not make this user a company admin. If you do make a user, you can also set an expiration date. This is great if you wanted to say create a forward account for outside companies to help use your same library. You can actually expire those forward accounts at certain dates and times. If you do that, I would recommend giving it a description. You can also associate this user directly to user groups if you've made any user groups. Well, we may not have made any yet, so we won't do this just yet. I'm going to go ahead and create this particular demo user here. Now, when you click create, that user is going to get an email. When they get that email, it's going to say, here's a temporary password for you. Here's your username and a temporary password. They'll log into Hive. They'll set their new password, set their name. If you misspelled anything, they'll correct that because they can control their own user information, assuming it's not linked to Active Directory. We'll talk about this in a moment here as well. All right, so I've got some users. Let's also make a user group. So if I wanted to make, say, a user group, maybe I've got a sales team. I want to make a sales user group here. I can add users to that user group, like this Robin Hood person right here. I can select that person and create them. They're going to, or not create them, but add them to that particular sales user group. So creating of users is very simple, just straightforward if you're using just basic new users. If you're doing new user groups, fantastic. Again, it's just a name of a group. That's all it is. It's nothing super magical here. The reason for groups and users, well, users is so they can log in. User groups is so you can more easily control rights. So let's jump over here to libraries and control some rights. So if I go to standards and procedures 2 right here, I want everybody to be able to see this, regardless of what group they're in. So I'm going to add my everyone group. It's a group that I built. This is supposed to be all corporate users of Hive, though I failed to add that salesperson to this group. I can always fix that in a minute. Maybe I want my sales team to gain access to this as well. And maybe I want my BIM managers to have access to the standards and procedures, and maybe they're going to help me administer this. So I'm going to go ahead and add all 3 groups here, and I can assign rights to how I want people to interact with this library. So everyone right now, I'm going to set everybody up as a contributor to this library, except for the sales team. They can review the standards and procedures, but I don't want them actually commenting back. So I'm going to set them up as a consumer. We'll talk about what that means in just a moment here. And my BIM management team here, they're going to be admins. So I'm making choices as to what their rights are in the library right here at the library level. And that really is library by library. I can go to a different library and assign completely different rights in a different library where users can have different roles. So what do these rights mean? Well, a consumer means they can find the content, they can actually look at stuff in that library, and they can open it up. And that's it. They can't comment, they can't rate, they can't, do anything else there. A contributor, like what I've assigned for everybody that's not a salesperson here, a contributor has the ability to go in and actually rate and comment on content. They also have the ability to help you with some tagging. So if you want them to be able to tag stuff specifically, they can do that at the contributor level. And then up here, the admin level that I've assigned to the BIM managers, they'll actually see libraries, content, and add content as an admin user, because they have to be able to admin the library itself, which means they can go in here and adjust groups and users. They can also add content to the library and manage the content that is in the libraries, those to which they are assigned administrator roles. So when I update this, instantly across my network, as people log in and they start using stuff, they'll be able to see standards and procedures 2 at this point and be able to interact with it based on the rights they've been assigned in standards and procedures 2. So that's all done. Now, an important thing here, there's other ways of creating users. I talked about just one way, the new user option right here. This is one at a time. It's very manual. If you've got 5 to 10 people, fantastic, do this, no big deal. If you've got 20 to 30 people, you might want to batch add users, where you can enter a whole bunch of emails separated by commas. You can get this big old list, maybe pull it out of Outlook or something, and add users that way. That's one way that you can create a bunch of users. As you add them, they all get an email saying log in. They can set their own first and last name, and they can begin using Hive from there. Now, you can also do this another way. If you maybe want to use a CSV file and get a list of this information, you can download a sample CSV file to wherever you'd like. In my case, I've already downloaded it and I've begun filling it out a little bit. I can open up that CSV file here in Excel, and what I've got is the email address, which is required, first names and last names inside of here, and what their description is going to be, so I can actually have an idea of which groups I want to throw them into. This particular CSV file does not have group association because you can't necessarily predict what groups are going to exist. So, you have to do that after the fact. But I have a bunch of users here, and if I wanted to import them, I can go over here. I'm not going to save this file. I can select a CSV file to upload a bunch of users. In my case, I've got that on my desktop out here. I can grab that, and it's going to automatically parse all those users directly in. So here, I've got a bunch of users that were added straight into HIVE. All right. So I've got a bunch of users that way. But there's another way. I'm going to minimize Revit here, both Revits. In fact, I've got the 2016 all done with its processing here. Inside of HIVE, or I'm on the desktop out here, I've got a CTC Accounts Active Directory synchronization tool. Now, this is a great tool. With this one, you can actually automatically bring users in from Active Directory. Let's bring a few more users in over here. I'm going to go ahead and just double click on that tool. Oh, it went off my other monitor here. I have to log in. Give me a second. The login that you use is the same one that you use for HIVE. It's a CTC account login. So give me a second here. I'm going to log in. And it's grabbing some information right now. It's actually processing all of the users that I've added so far, and it's got them in a list. I'm going to pull this across here. There we go. There's my account active synchronizer here. It's got all these users, and it actually wants to synchronize every one of them with what's inside Active Directory. Now, in my case, I'm going to take Joe Demo and tell it, don't synchronize Joe Demo. I don't want that user to actually be synchronized. So I'm going to unlink this one from Active Directory in this case, so it doesn't actually publish their information. It's going to leave them Joe Demo. These other users here, I may or may not have gotten the names right. It's going to actually correct them based on what Active Directory thinks their names are. Now, I have another benefit here. I can come over here and I can add groups directly from Active Directory. So I can actually add my AD security groups from here. So I'm going to go down and say, well, here's some security groups. What do I have? I have my all employees group. I've got an HR group, IT, management, and sales. And I can have the users pre-dumped into their proper security bucket and have these groups actually auto-defined inside of HIVE as well. And it'll also then add all of the users that are in these user groups. And if I run this tool on a regular basis, you can actually script that pretty easily. I can have this constantly up to date. So if a user leaves the firm, HIVE will automatically, effectively, update and disable that user so I don't have to remember to do it myself. And if they move from one security group to another, maybe they get a promotion, they go to the BIM management team, they're automatically a BIM manager. So if I use these security groups from Active Directory, that can help me out quite a bit inside of HIVE if I want it to. So here in this case, if I was to go ahead and just grab all these groups and tell it to use them all, or rather, yeah, let's just use these guys here. Yep, close the. There we go. Add it over. I was looking for the button. I didn't see where it was. They moved it on me. So I can add all these groups over here. And then if I add these groups, it'll also add a list of all of those users. Now, this is going to take it a second to parse. I'll let it chunk there for a minute. It's going to add 32 different users here. Yeah, 32 different users directly to this Active Directory system. I'm not going to sit there and watch. Well, I guess it's not taking that long. Well, it's going to do every one of the groups, each of the 5. So I'm going to go back into Revit here for a minute. And we're going to take a look over here at some other things we can do. We'll go back to that. So also then we've got tag administration. This is another major topic inside of HIVE, is tag administration. So you saw that I was adding tags while I was adding content earlier, or associating tags, I should say, while I was adding content earlier. After a while, you may end up with some duplicate tags, like I've got coordinate and I have shared coordinates. Well, I don't really want coordinates anymore. Coordinates, I feel, is not really very useful. Now, what I probably should do is I should go search for all the content using coordinates and swap it out for shared coordinates before I do this. In fact, let's go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to go to search. I'm not going to filter for a specific library. I am going to go find anything using coordinates. Let's go find where that is. Here we go. Coordinates right there. Search for all of it. Anything using coordinates. Hey, look, there's nothing even using it. Well, that's fantastic. So I can go over here. Oh, you know what? I got to uncheck the Revit only content. That probably makes more sense. Let's see. Here we got a bunch of documents that are using coordinates because I actually made those 4 earlier today. I'm going to grab all of these guys and I'm going to strip coordinates from them. I'm going to update this and just modify the tags here. well, not add tags, I'm gonna remove tags. I've got, let's see, standards, shared coordinates, and coordinates, shared coordinates on all these guys. Yep, all right. I'm gonna remove the tag of coordinates from them. Let's get rid of that guy. So shared coordinates is already applied. Nothing else out here has coordinates on it, so I should be pretty good to go. So I'm gonna go back to my tag management, and I'm simply gonna take coordinates, and I'm gonna delete it. So I'm gonna delete that particular object there. That's gonna go away. You can do it for anything. You can also take any tags inside of here, and you can rename them. So maybe I want to take help, and instead of help, have it be called help documentation or help document. If I double click on this to edit it, or just click the edit button on top, I can actually call this out, help documents. And then I can update that. Now across my entire library, this is updated. All those things that were associated originally to help are now associated to help documents. And of course, you can make brand new tags from here as well. All right, next major topic. Actually, let's go back and revisit and see what's happened with those users that were added out here. I'm just going to pull this to the foreground. Here's my events list right there. It tells me there was a whole bunch of success inside of here. There's a couple of these that were linked, like demo was converted over to an Active Directory account in this case because I forgot to re-strip them away, which is fine. That's okay. But it went through and had a couple of errors. It couldn't add a few of these guys because they were already disabled in Active Directory. So it doesn't just throw people into your Hive environment that were already disabled. Maybe they've already left the company, so it got rid of them from that list. But it went through and did most everybody and got most people added across. So I've got a whole bunch of users over here that have been added. Let's take Joe Demo and let's just remove them again. I'm going to unlink them so it doesn't actually publish their changes back to them. I like keeping the name Joe Demo, and it'll replace them with just Demo User. So, because that's what Active Directory has set. If I publish this to my CTC account right now, go ahead and do this now, publish. It's going to go through and update everybody, all the user groups. Oh, looks like it did Demo User anyway. Bummer. I thought it might do that. But I'm going to go ahead and close this out. It's already done the publish. It's all ready to go. And if I go back over to my users list here in Hive and I refresh my users list, notice now how I have all of these users, and all of them, except for my demo user right here, Joe Demo, they're all linked to Active Directory, and they're all currently active. The nice thing is that if Active Directory ever changes and users get disabled and they rerun that sync tool, they'll be disabled here as well. If they change their security groups, if I refresh this, I should have, yep, there's my Active Directory linked security groups over here as well. So I have all of those. And now I can go through my libraries if I want to. And let's say I go to Standards and Procedures 2, and instead of using my manually created sales group, I can actually go ahead and add to the groups association here, the sales group coming out of Active Directory, or my all employees security group here. And again, this way I don't have to deal with manually managing this when I add people. I can have that automatically sync to the Active Directory side. Okay. So we kind of bounced back to users a couple of times just because we're waiting for some things to process here, but hopefully that makes a bit of sense. We were just talking tag administration, which is an important major step here in your library for searching. The last thing, well, one of the last things we're going to talk about here is request management. Users themselves can submit requests. You as admins can submit requests to other libraries to have other admins take care of certain tasks. That's great. You can see your list of requests here on the My Requests tab. If you are a library administrator or a company administrator and you go over to Manage Requests, you'll see requests that you can actually respond to. Now, as a company administrator, you'll see everything over here. As a library administrator, you will only see requests that were submitted to a specific library. That's important, actually. End users, when they're making a request right here, they can actually associate a specific library to their request, like, hey, in our corporate content, I feel we should have this thing, whatever it is, and I can give you some files that you can actually reference to leverage that. Well, when you're responding to a request, if I go back here to Manage Requests, if I look down this list, first of all, I'm going to filter out anything that has already been completed or anything that's been rejected. I only care about stuff that's pending or that's in progress. Pending means it hasn't been touched yet. So in my case, there's very few things that are pending. Well, there's 5 things that are pending and 3 things that are in progress. The in progress stuff, I'm just going to leave it alone. The pending thing here, like somebody here needs additional shared coordinates documentation. Well, what do you know? I just added that today. Let's go take a look at what they gave me, because I was actually noticing here, if I back this up, that they gave me 4 attachments right there. Well, if I edit this, what I want is to kind of see what they've suggested. So they suggested the library of standards and procedures. I put it in standards and procedures too. They didn't give me any tags. I can see who requested it and when, and I can see if they've given me any files, and I can take these files and I can download them, review them, and then eventually, if I feel that they're appropriate, add them into my library. Well, oddly enough, I've already done that. So what I can do here is I'm going to back this up 1 level. I'm going to take ownership of this so the person knows I took care of it for them. I'm going to update the stat. Well, first of all, assign it to myself so they can actually see on their side who it was that did the work. In this case, it's me. I'm going to go ahead and add me to this. And over to the right, it'll actually show that. If I scroll to the right, you'll see that I am the owner of that particular request. And I'm going to update the status for this request to completed. And that user gets notified, hey, this is done. This is ready to go. So that way they can know, hey, I can go search for this thing now. That's pretty important and meaningful as well. Now you're communicating bidirectionally. You get emailed when they submit requests. They get emailed when you handle it. Last thing, last important topic for those of you that are going to be administrators of HIVE, deleting content. If you find some stuff that you want to get rid of, you can either do this from the search window or you can do it from the content page over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look for all the content that I've got in, let's say, Standards and Procedures 2, and I'm going to delete this stuff. So I'm going to apply this filter. It's going to find all 4 files. In fact, I'm going to delete 2 of the files, not all of them, just 2 of them. I'm going to delete these 2 files right here. You can take any number of objects and basically choose to delete it. This is kind of like deleting a file in Windows. When you do this, you have the choice of deleting it from HIVE only or from HIVE and your local network if you really want to nuke this file. Now, I recommend typically you're probably going to want to do HIVE only. That's up to you, though, of course. You can make the choice of HIVE and local network. But notice this, there's no undo for local deletion, right? So probably HIVE only is the best way to play. Now, it does put it into sort of a recycle bin. Up here on the top of the content management page, there's a delete content option. And anything that you've chosen to delete goes here for 7 days, for 1 week. You can actually see the number of remaining days right there. So if you don't touch it for 7 days, it's gone. It disappears. It's gone forever, permanently deleted. Or you can forcibly permanently delete them right from here as well. Now, if you change your mind and you're like, no, that was a horrible idea. I didn't mean to delete those 2 files. That was an accident. You can actually restore those files and you can tell it which library they're supposed to go to. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back in Standards and Procedures 2, and it'll go back into my library so users can search for it. All right, we've covered a lot of stuff today. Let's jump back. Let me shut down HIVE, shut down Revit, close this all out, back to the desktop here, and let's go back into the PowerPoint here. All right. Last thing, oh, I forgot about one of the topics. One of the things you can actually do with those users, I was talking about making a forward account. This portion right here, you can actually talk to your IT team about a forward account. They can make a new distribution group, basically. There's a couple of different ways of doing this. They'll know the best way for you guys. But they can create an account that's got whatever name is relevant. The reason why I recommend this sometimes, kind of revisiting the topic of users, is because sometimes you might want to have users from outside your firm and have better control over what they can do. By having an actual internal email address for that outside partnership, you can control exactly what they can see and when it dies, when it actually gets disabled. You can put a timeout inside of HIVE and say this particular account is disabled on this date. Now, you can't do that with invited users. There's a way in HIVE where you can invite somebody, but if you have them as your own company user, you actually can time them out. Now, obviously, you don't want to have one of these for every person outside your firm. That might be a bit excessive, but what a lot of my clients will do is make, say, a forward account for a specific partnership on a project. So you can do this. You can make this forward account. You can set it up so that it knows who to go to. You can modify those properties and say, add so-and-so, such and such a member, have it forward to their email address specifically. And then, it basically requires that these users, get authenticated and have some kind of internal mailing system. You can also have yourself on this forward account. So you can see, if they're actually using that account for whatever reason or what gets set up for it. but you can basically leverage that within Hive to basically build a better forward. In fact, an example of this, I close out of Hive. Oops, try this again. Let me open up Hive here before I go to my closing thoughts. If I go to users, I've made a user called forward. So, and you saw that actually in that previous example. Forward at ctcexpresstools.com. All right, so I've got that. First name might be XYZ company. I can put them in there manually. I can set an expiration date here. So I can modify when that account stops working. If I say, well, they've only got 2 weeks of access to this while they're using, something on a project with me, or they've got, 1 month of access, whatever. I can set what that expiration date is, and then I can forget about it because on that date, they automatically get disabled. I can also add them to a group. Now, what I will usually do in this case is I'll make a group that is specific to outside consultants. So I'm going to go here and make a new consultants group. Consultants and partners maybe. And I'm going to add that forward account, whoever that was, directly to that particular group. There's that XYZ company. There might be others that are partnered with me as well. Individual users might be disabled at different times. But then when I create this user group, I can go to libraries and give these users access to specific libraries. If they're not a part of a library, they can't see it. So if I go to like standards and procedures 2, maybe this is some documentation that I want that specific group to be able to see. Maybe it's communication in my project. I can have that consultants and partners group added. And again, I can set them up as just consumers because frankly, I don't want their opinion. So I can update my library accordingly. I can also go to like my corporate content library here. And once again, I can add specifically consultants and partners as consumers. Everybody in my company is all contributors. They can tag and comment and rate and do stuff like that. But my outside consultants and partners, they can just use my content. And because this stuff is all cloud hosted, they don't have to have any kind of VPN tunnel into my office. It makes it super straightforward for them to find and use it. So that kind of revisits users again, but a specific kind of a user, one that you've specifically made as a forward account so you have full control over them. And you say, yeah, Sean, but why don't I just use that invite option in the library? You can absolutely do that. You can invite people. The trick is here, if I invite somebody, like if I say Sean Z at CTC Software, this is a different company, .com, than my CTC Express Tools email. So that person has to be invited because they're not a CTCExpressTools.com user. With this, when I invite somebody specifically, I only have consumer and contributor as roles. They can't be an admin, and I can't time bomb this. I have to micromanage them at the user level. I can't just have them dumped into a user group and already have their roles assigned. I got to go library by library, person by person, and set them up. So I'm a big fan of leveraging that consultants and partners group and just have that associated to libraries as consumers. And then, when I add a new user for that forward, whatever company it is, ABC Partners or whatever, then that company specifically gets time bombed at a certain time, but they're a part of this consultants and partners group. And my administration now is very simple and very straightforward. All right, let's close back out of Hive again and talk about final closing thoughts. I've went way over my time today. Well, not way over, I guess I'm 7 minutes over my time today. Closing thoughts. Hive allows adding and searching of all content. This is completely independent of folders. That's important. It's just using the file properties. You can use some folder searching in the discover portion, but it's really minimal. The goal is more using file properties and names and metadata to actually search for stuff. As a company admin or a library admin, your first priority should really be library management, user and group management. With that library management, you should be adding some content, getting a little bit in there before you actually get a bunch of users into the actual Hive environment. And the nice thing is that adding content is actually pretty straightforward. It's really easy. You're either adding files, or if you're doing Revit-specific work, you're adding stuff out of a Revit project model. When you're adding content, I mentioned this while we're going through it, consider generalized tagging. This allows users then later on, if you allow this, to refine some of those tags, You know, that way you're not micromanaging every single tag all day long when you're adding individual pieces of content. You can generalize a bunch of stuff. This is all architectural content. This is all mechanical content. This is all imperial versus metric. Those are general tags that you can do pretty quickly. Hive basically searches, again, all of the metadata, including all those custom tags. So kind of like what was going up on top, it allows searching and adding of content independent of folder. It also allows searching of all that data in the file. So when you're dealing with some things like Revit content, it looks at every single parameter value and caches that. It looks at every type name. It looks at all of that stuff and makes it so while you're adding that content, it's a byproduct of you adding content into Hive. Windows basic files, it looks at who the author was, when the file was created, things like that. And you can search based on those as well. File extensions, those are all bits of metadata that are added that you can use when you're searching for stuff inside of Hive. So it's not like you have to worry about it. You're not manually adding all that stuff. It's just automatically there. And you can add your own custom tags if you need to make it that much more searchable. And finally, content can be hosted in the cloud, or you can have it exclusively on your local network. That's up to you, and that's a part of that major company settings that we talked about first thing in today's discussion. You can choose which of those two you want. It's already included in Hive. If you want to use the cloud, fantastic. If you don't, that's your choice. But don't let that be a limiting factor. If you want to actually be able to share your content, cloud hosting is definitely the best way to go, and Hive can certainly help you with that process. All right, everybody, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you all so much. We look forward to seeing you in future presentations. And if you have any feedback on this, certainly when you exit today's presentation, please give us that feedback. We love hearing what you have to say. And we use that all the time when we're actually trying to go through and make sure that we give you content you want to hear. So again, thank you and have a fantastic day.